Hello and welcome to the Con Couple. I'm Richard,
I'm Caroline.
and we go to a frankly concerning number of cons every year.
I would say we don't go to enough cons.
This argument is never going to end.
No.
So, this weekend we went to Bourbon City Steam, a steampunk convention down in Lexington,
Louisville.
Louisville.
This is why I'm in charge of all the facts.
Yeah. You will notice a common theme that I get these cities in this country mixed up a lot.
You cannot point to the state of Ohio on a map earlier this week. So, that was cool.
I pointed to the state next to Ohio.
What was the state next to Ohio?
Indiana?
That's correct. You pointed to Indiana. But
Yes.
Ohio and Indiana do not have remotely the same shape.
Fair.
You at least know what part of the country we're in.
Yeah. Now I do, after you mocked me relentlessly about it. But anyway, I think we've got a little off topic.
So you're at Bourbon City Steampunk Con. This is its second year running. Last year was called River City Steampunk. I think they changed it because of another con that had a similar name. But again, I don't know personally, at least not well, any of the people who work for it, so I don't know all the details behind there. It was also significantly earlier this year, because I think it was in May, June last year.
Somewhere in that ballpark, yes. Based on a conversation we overheard, I think they changed the time this year to avoid being at the same time as Chicago Steampunk, because obviously there's a lot of crossover between those two, and they did not want to be competing with that, which is very fair and valid.
Yeah, again, still not exactly sure. We know that a lot goes into when you organize a con. You've got to make sure that a hotel space you can afford is free, and that's not always an easy thing to find. This is Bourbon City Steampunk Con in Louisville, Kentucky.
Yep.
So, 3-day convention started on Friday.
Yep.
And we are recording this episode a little bit late because somebody forgot the microphones.
That somebody was me. So our plan had been to record this episode on the drive back. We're actually recording this on the Wednesday afterwards, just because that's the next time we're taking a long drive.
And if you can't tell, this is raw, unedited from our car, so not exactly even high value for a podcast. We're kind of bottom of the barrel there.
Yep.
But hopefully it's at least somewhat enjoyable to listen to. And as a reminder from last episode, we are using hands-free devices in the car, and I, the person who I'm not driving, is controlling all stuff that requires button pushing.
Yep. I'm just doing the tedious job of driving us to and from where we're going. So, we're going to start, as we usually do, with kind of an overview of the location and the hotel, and all of that kind of stuff. Then we'll talk about the sort of broad stuff, and then we'll get to the nitty-gritty of what we actually did at this con.
Do you remember what we actually did at this con?
No, you're probably going to have to look up the schedule.
I already have.
Good. So, the hotel itself is... what hotel is it? Holiday Inn?
Yes, Holiday Inn.
Holiday Inn. Again, in Louisville.
Yes, Louisville. Good job. You got it. In case you can't tell, we're kind of horrible with names, so bear with us throughout the podcast.
And we've actually been to this particular hotel. This is the third time we've been there for a convention. The first time was this convention last year.
When it was called River City Steampunk.
Yep.
That was our first time going. We only did 2 days, I think, that year. This year we did 3.
Yep. And we've also been to a board game convention there, which I think was called River City Gaming or something along those lines, which I think it's one of the conventions that I think they decided there were just several conventions that had River City or some variation of that in their name, which is why they changed the name.
Yeah, cities I think have a lot of nicknames and things like that. Although River That Catches on Fire Con is not a thing yet. I kind of want it to be.
Not a thing.
The Cleveland River caught on fire.
Okay.
Because it was so polluted, it's well known.
That sounds bad.
It was. We're not good at staying on track yet, are we?
Really not.
So we drove down on Friday. We did want to get there in time for opening ceremonies. It's not always possible for us because he does work Fridays. I don't this semester because I'm a college professor and I get to choose my own schedule, so I'm off Fridays this semester.
Yep. But
this week was spring break, so I had a little bit of extra free time, and nobody was in the office over spring break, so they didn't care about you skipping out early.
Yeah, again, we managed to make it down for opening ceremonies. Took a little bit of careful driving, but we made it without too many problems.
And the venue, generally large or nice hotel. Again, smaller con, probably round. I'm trying to give a we're not good at estimating either, but
A few hundred people?
a few hundred people. I definitely think it was more well attended than last year.
Definitely.
Which makes me happy.
Yeah, I would definitely say they had more people there than they did this time last year, or when it was around last year, I should say. And that does warm my heart. But the hotel itself is quite a nice little hotel, big sort of effectively long but very wide hallway, to all intents and purposes, with sort of a hall coming off it that they were using as their vendors hall,
and 2 Canadian geese guarding the entrance.
Yep, that was very amusing to us because it's definitely pairing season for the geese.
Yep, they're probably nesting soon.
Yep. And then a number of sort of smaller panel rooms, which could probably hold somewhere in the 30 to 40 people range, at a guess. I didn't see many fire signs this time, so I didn't take count of those. But they probably had, what, half a dozen panel rooms, give or take?
Half a dozen panel rooms and a lot of paneling, I think, for a con this size, which we love to see.
Yeah.
Fan Expo, which we're going to this weekend, has probably about the same number of panels, despite having 20,000 people there. So
as opposed to a few hundred.
Yeah.
So it's always kind of a culture shock going from a little con to a big con, or vice versa. So we'll see how we feel, but that's going to be next week's episode of the podcast.
So parking here was free. That was always nice. We love free parking at a con.
Yep.
And generally we also tend to like cons that are away from city centers, which this one is, just because parking's easier. It's easier to get around. You can come and leave when you want, which is amazing since, as we mentioned last episode, we can't stay in hotels due to my disability. So we have to get an Airbnb, and being able to go back and forth with that without any pain is always great.
Yeah. In this particular context, our Airbnb was about 15 minutes away. So what we actually ended up doing for this one was, while we had a break in the schedule, we actually popped over, unloaded the car, and we were able to drive back in the space of an hour, which was quite nice to do. And we should definitely consider in the future as an option.
Yeah. And other than that, the space I thought was fairly well laid out. Again, I was in ball gowns all weekend, felt pretty comfortable moving around. Bathrooms worked pretty well or easily. Some rooms I don't think were as accessible. Like for some of them, you did have to go up a staircase. I think you could have gotten...
You could. So there's basically a sort of a pretty nice, actually, staircase that you can use to get to the second floor. And up there, they also had their tea room, which is pretty much what it sounds like. It was a room where you could drink tea, eat snacks, hang out, all of that kind of jazz. But getting to that, if you couldn't walk up those stairs for some reason, would require kind of going around the corner, up a lift, and then round. It was certainly doable, but it wasn't the easiest thing.
Other than that, I said the con, at least in terms of space, was fairly accessible.
Yeah, I would say so. I think it was quite well laid out. They had a number of people there who were using mobility assistance devices, primarily sort of mobility scooter kind of things, and they seem to be getting around quite comfortably.
Although obviously we don't have every disability, so we're not going to know like all the accessibility issues, just the ones that are apparent to us.
Yeah. So
for food options
was the other thing I was going to talk about. So this particular hotel has a sort of how would I describe it?
Restaurant.
Well, it does have the small restaurant, which interestingly, the small restaurant was open for this con, and it was open for this con last year. It wasn't for the board gaming convention, which makes me think it's probably something the con has to specifically request.
Request or like let people know, or maybe it's just open certain times. It is still a bit confusing when it's actually open.
Yeah. But again, small little restaurant, very quite nice food, not hideously expensive. Probably I ate there sort of Friday and Saturday and spent about $20 a go, which it's about average for what you can spend at something like this. And they also had a station at lunchtime that did just basic burgers, hot dogs, that kind of thing. Which again, completely fine, completely edible, nothing to write home about. But serves you well if you just want a snack in the middle of the day. The only real issue with that is it really is only open for about 3 hours or something like that. Which meant on Saturday, I because we got distracted by some stuff on Saturday, I ended up missing the window on that, so I didn't eat anything until the evening, which was fine.
Yeah.
But just something to be aware of and keep in mind that Oh, and that only takes cash for some reason. But they do have a cash machine in the lobby if you forget to bring any.
So yeah, they have the restaurant, and they have the little, like, I would call it like a snack bar or something like that.
Yeah, that's probably about the best way to describe it.
And I can't eat anything just because my disability makes it hard for me to pretty much eat any food that I don't like prepare or make myself. So I typically just eat in the evenings when we get back from cons. And I'm pretty used to doing that at this point, so it doesn't bother me. I kind of forget that other people like me to eat regularly, so I worry about you sometimes.
That has happened once or twice. But again, for the most part, I'm also, in the state where if I don't eat until we get back to the Airbnb at night, I'm fine with that.
Mm.
But no. So reasonable food availability, quality was perfectly fine, perfectly decent. Actually, to be fair, their broccoli was actually really good. Because on the Saturday, I ended up getting a side of broccoli with my my burger, and it was actually really good.
Yeah, there is pretty limited seating at the restaurant, though. You do kind of have to just hope there's a table available for a con, because it's serving both con guests and hotel guests. So pretty much any time it was open, it was always packed.
Yeah. On that, I tipped well because that poor bartender, waitress, whatever her official job title was rushed off her feet. She was doing a fantastic job, but she probably needed like 2 extra staff there. So that was kind of the hotel space and the venue.
Yeah, we didn't get a hotel room there, so we can't really comment on that aspect of it. But it does have a hotel attached, which does mean you could get a room there if you wanted to stay for the con.
Which is what I think most people did.
Yeah, I also do find it interesting because I know there's another Steampunk Con next weekend, or this upcoming weekend now, in Tucson, that I think a bunch of people are going to both this one and that one. So hats off to you if you're traveling that far across 2 multiple weekends. That's honestly kind of impressive.
Yeah.
We are not doing that.
Because our schedule is already packed full of cons.
Primarily like airplanes, and traveling mid-semester is a bit tricky. So should we get into what we did?
I believe so. Is there anything else in particular we want to talk about the venue before we get onto that?
It's a pretty decent venue for the space, and I think it's suiting the con well. I hope it can kind of grow in it a bit, because I'm sure it's not cheap to rent.
I would say not, but they're definitely making good use of it.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, in terms of there was one other section we forgot to talk about, which was kind of their main stage.
Yep.
Which again, right next to the vendors hall. Pretty solid, decent main stage. Nothing too fancy, but doesn't really need to be.
Some nosebleed, but it doesn't really matter so much for this con, because I don't think there are any like incredibly loud events at this con, at least not that we're going on in the downstairs rooms. We'll talk about the late night parties later.
Yeah, but there was some louder stuff at some of the late night things, but again, we'll get to that.
Yeah.
But yeah, for the most part, good little hotel to hold an event at, and I think they were making good use of the space for the most part.
Yeah.
So, Friday, I think we started with opening ceremonies, didn't we?
Yeah. And just as a reminder, as we're going through this, we give criticism lovingly. Like, no event's perfect. There's always going to be some stuff that goes wrong. But that doesn't mean we didn't like the event. We're just kind of talking our way through it.
Yep.
And again, putting on a con, mostly volunteer work, done by people who just love, in this case, steampunk, which I think you could really see.
Mm-hmm.
And I really hope in this particular case, especially, this con keeps going.
I absolutely agree. And again, I freely admit, we go to a lot of different types of conventions.
Most of which we're not actually fans of the thing.
Mm-hmm.
That'll come up more later.
Yeah. But we just like going to cons because we love the atmosphere, we love the vibes, and we love just like interacting with people who are passionate about whatever the thing is. Whereas steampunk, I think, is closest to the thing that we're both actually into. Yeah.
Although I don't consume a lot of steampunk media. Though we both like worked in the medium a bit for like our other creative projects.
Yeah.
So
again, steampunk aesthetics are just the thing we love, but I think the thing we love most about the steampunk community is just it's so creative and it encourages creativity so much.
And it's also so welcoming.
Yeah.
So we'll talk a lot about. We felt very welcome this weekend, despite with a lot of small cons, it's a bunch of people who know each other, and we're typically kind of the outsiders, just because I find random cons on the internet, and then we just kind of go to them.
Yep.
So we typically go not knowing anyone there other than people who we've met like previous years at the con. But steampunk cons in particular just seem very welcoming, and really it's a bunch of people who want to talk to you, which is awesome.
It's great. And again, they love new people and welcoming new people into their fandom. Which is interesting because of the cons we go to, I do feel like Steampunk's cons skew a little older. Whereas with your anime cons, most of the people there are going to be somewhere in that 18 to 25 age bracket. Whereas with Steampunk cons, we're certainly not the youngest people there, but we are probably on the younger end.
Generally, yeah. And generally the people who are younger tend to have been brought by either their parents or like an older friend or something like that.
Yeah.
Which, again, I hope that we can get a new generation of people into Steampunk because it's such a delightful community and it's such fun.
I would agree. And again, I think a lot of it just comes down to we haven't had a decent like mainstream steampunk hit yet.
Mm-hmm.
We've had plenty for fantasy and sci-fi and all of that jazz, but steampunk is poorly represented at the moment in mainstream media, which I'd like to see fixed at some point in the future. But so we started with opening ceremonies, which was very, very fun and cute. They did a Frankenstein riff, or a young Frankenstein riff, I should say.
Yeah, I think we were technically in that room before we were supposed to be because we just kind of sat down while they were still setting up. But they did not kick us out, which I appreciated because as a person with a disability, sometimes when you sit down, you can't get up for a bit.
Mm-hmm.
And I generally can't wait outside of rooms for very long. It just doesn't work well with my disability, even though I don't look visibly disabled. So I was appreciative of the fact that they just kind of let us hang out there during rehearsal.
Mm-hmm.
And we got to practice a couple bits as audience members with the person who was running it, which was very cute. So
just to know, when was the appropriate time to
yeah,
and all of that jazz. But so that was fun and cute. And again, they did a good job of like introducing all the guests, saying what was going on, all of that jazz.
Yeah, the opening ode to Frankenstein was very, very cute and very fun. So I liked it a lot. So.
Yeah.
And the room, I think, was pretty packed, too. We're sitting in the front, so I couldn't really see, but they had a lot of people in the room at that point.
That room was close to full, and I did a head count, or a chair count at one point, and I think they had somewhere in the region of 128-ish seats in there.
Mm-hmm. And you have to keep in mind that not everyone might not even be there at that point, because it's still like 3 p.m. on a Friday.
But yeah, so the next thing that we did was... You've got the schedule.
Yes, I do. That was Drake's exhibition of the Bazaar, which was also just in the Oscar Wilde Ballroom.
Yeah. Which apparently they have a YouTube channel, so go check them out if you're curious. But effectively a classic sideshow act. Mm-hmm. So a little bit of endurance-y kind of stuff. Lying on a bed of nails. Eating weird stuff, all that kind of. Classic macabre stuff, a little bit of magic. Mm-hmm. And some dancing and some other stuff that was brought in with that. They said they were one of the only remaining sideshows in America at this point. Which I do kind of believe. It does feel like an art that's been largely lost. Yeah, I don't really know how you define a sideshow act at this point in history, but I'm glad that this could be the space where they could, I guess, show off what they were doing a little bit. And again, they were good. I enjoyed it. So yeah, it was a little bit smaller crowd at that particular point in time, but they, I think, worked the crowd pretty well in terms of what they were doing, and everyone was dressed up and having fun. And I know that they also hung around the whole convention and also participated in it, which is one thing that I really liked about the guests at the Steampunk Con, is they were basically just also active participants in the con. If you go to like a bigger con, like David Tennant's not going to go to a bunch of panels or something like that, but here, all of their special guests are like going around to different panels and talking with everyone, and that's super awesome. Yeah, and doing all kinds of fun stuff. So after that, I think was the point where there was a gap in the schedule for effectively an hour for dinner, which is when we took the opportunity to, as I said, go and offload all the stuff at the Airbnb. So I just kind of ran in, unloaded the car, dropped the stuff, and then came back. You did not help with that because, do you want to describe your outfits for this weekend? I don't even know if I remember what I was wearing on Friday. I was Persephone. You were Persephone. So, yeah, that was the first of, I think, several ball gowns. Yeah, if you've seen the artwork we use for this podcast, that is a sketch that was done for us by a wonderful artist at Fan Expo a couple of years ago of her and I as Hades and Persephone. So she was wearing that ball gown, which again, it's always a winner. People like it. It just gets a really good reaction. Mm-hmm. But it's not the most practical thing to unload a car in. So, so I was doing the heavy lifting on that one.
which again is fair, and I do appreciate you doing that. So then we drove back to the venue. You had dinner at the restaurant that we talked about a little bit.
Yep.
And then because it was, I think, a lighter Friday night, and on Friday night, people really wanted to party. Like, really wanted to party. There were several drinking panels that we don't go to because I can't drink.
And I needed to drive.
So we avoided those, but people were pretty raring to go by, I think.
About 8-ish.
8-ish, yeah. So after you ate dinner, we meandered up to, I think, the room party up at that point.
Was it not? I thought there was another panel between then and then.
As far as I can tell, no. Like, we looked around at a couple different panels while you were eating. I did that, remember? But there wasn't really anything that was kind of grabbing me on my own while you were eating. So we talked about doing that. And then after that, we pretty much went upstairs, I'm pretty sure. Oh, no, we didn't. You're right.
Oh, we did the Gothic literature.
Yes, you're right. Sorry, I missed that on the schedule. So we did the Gothic literature panel, which was also awesome, by Leanna Renee Herbert. I think I'm doing that right. Hebert. I apologize. This is what the name says on the schedule. I probably should know it better.
Yeah.
She's awesome, though.
She is great. She's an author. She was doing a talk on Gothic literature, kind of working her way through a lot of the classics and just kind of talking about them in a very animated style. And I appreciate the fact that she came prepared for that panel by dressing in an outfit with some really fantastic sleeves.
Yeah, so she was just waving her arms all around to gesticulate, which was amazing.
Yep, that was great. That was a lot of fun.
She also did, I'm pretty sure, the panel with like just very minimal notes, and she just could talk on about the subject because it was something she knew so much about, which was just kind of awesome to see and hear.
It's always great to see. And again, she was one of the con's guests and was also manning a stall in the vendor's hall, selling her books.
I have one of her books. I bought it, I think, the last time.
Last Steampunk Con,
yeah.
Yeah.
Key City. I've read the introduction. The introduction is extremely good. Haven't read more than that yet, but I hope to.
You've not had a chance to.
Yeah.
But yeah, again, that panel was a lot of fun. You know, very, very animated.
Mm-hmm. You know, talked a lot about the themes of Gothic literature and also some interesting recommendations about modern Gothic literature and how that would work, which I liked a lot. So.
Yeah. And yeah, after that we went up to the room party. So they clearly rented out a particular room, which was I want to say 74 or something like that, which was, as you would imagine, on the 7th floor.
Yep.
Which I think they rented specifically to use as a sort of party suite, effectively. Probably because, so room parties at conventions have a reputation for being a bit out of hand sometimes. So I think they figured if they set their own up, you know, they could prevent it getting too raucous. I don't know how successful they were.
Yeah, I don't know if the bed in the back of the room got some action or not later that night. Who knows?
Who knows? But yeah, we went up there. You know, they let us in. We did get IG checked at the door.
Which I do think they were doing to everyone, not just us.
Yeah. But again, they were serving alcohol, so I understand the desire to be careful. I did not have any alcohol. I did try some of their non-alcoholic punch, which was actually pretty good. And then we just kind of claimed a spot on the sofa, and people kept coming over to talk to us.
Yeah, which was awesome. Normally when you're at a party and you're just kind of standing in the corner with your partner, like people just kind of leave you alone. But like 6 or 7 different people and groups of people just came up to like talk to us about various stuff, which was amazingly awesome.
It was.
And some were doing it in character too, which was very fun.
Yeah. And again, you and I are kind of on this weird level of social awkwardness where like, once we know what the social rules are and we're comfortable, we are pretty extroverted and quite happy talking to people. Until that point, we are very introverted and don't want to intrude.
But I don't really like it as that dichotomy. Like, I'm shy. I'm not introverted.
Yeah.
Like, I want to go to a con pretty much every weekend. I'm not that introverted of a person. I'm just a little bit shy around new people.
Yeah.
But they made me feel really welcome, and I was able to, like, talk to a bunch of people. It was a little bit hard to hear, which is normal for, I think, a party atmosphere. And there was a little bit of chaos going on because I think there was a water drinking competition at one point.
So I don't think it was a competition. I think it was just every so often if somebody asked for water, they would do a what they referred to as the dihydrogen monoxide challenge, where you had to drink a glass of water. I'm unclear to what extent this was just an excuse to do it in a fun way while making sure people didn't get too drunk, or to what extent it was just somebody thought it would be funny.
And we were in the back of the room, so I couldn't really understand the rules or anything. So there was kind of a crowd of people around. People seemed to be having fun, though.
Yep. Again, it was just... I think the best way to describe it is an aggressively wholesome atmosphere.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you can tell that there were lots of people there who've known each other for absolutely years. But at the same time, they want new people to be welcome. They want new people to be there and like enjoy themselves.
Which is just amazingly great. And it's nice to be at a room party where you don't know anyone and you're not like just standing on a wall and not having anyone talk to you. Everyone was so welcoming and so nice and so fun.
Yeah.
Like I had a blast.
Yeah. And as per usual, you were getting a lot of compliments on your dress. But
yep.
like the thing about, so if you go to an anime con, probably about 40 to 50% of the people there are going to be in costume.
Mm-hmm.
If you go to a furry con, probably about, again, half the people there at most are going to be in costume.
Mm-hmm.
If you go to a steampunk con, basically everybody's in costume. Like, there's the degree to which their costumes are like fully formed varies.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think steampunk is largely one of those fandoms that frequently you get into and you start collecting stuff for your costume over the next like decade or two that you're in it.
It's also similar to the furry community insofar as you have a persona. In the furry community, they call it a fursona because they love puns in the furry community.
Yeah.
But here, like, your costume isn't like you're modeled after a specific character a lot of the time. You're typically creating your own steampunk character that you play as a costume. So it's more your own original animes. We call it OCs or whatever, but steampunk predates most anime OCs. So
Yeah.
I don't know what they call it other than just a persona, but it's a person that you would have. Like.
Yeah. Which again, I think is just a result of, because steampunk doesn't have as much stuff to directly copy,
Mm-hmm.
you are encouraged to create your own thing. Like, there are certain themes that crop up time and time again, like cogwheels and, steam-powered stuff, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
But if you go to an anime con, you're going to see two different people dressed as Hatsune Miku. If you go to a steampunk con, you're not going to see two people dressed identically unless they've done it on purpose.
Mm-hmm.
Unless they have collaborated together to be, to look the same.
Or they both conveniently decided to do steampunk takes on Beetlejuice.
Yeah, that was a weird coincidence.
But I don't think anyone minded that one.
Yeah. But to be fair, they both have very different takes on steampunk Beetlejuice.
That's true.
So
yeah, it's just nice to have that creative energy, and it's nice to kind of play, which I think you could see a lot of at that party. People were like playing as whatever persona they were taking on, which is fun to kind of be a part of, while also kind of being themselves at the same time. It's a really fun atmosphere to kind of be in.
Yeah.
It was rowdy that night.
It was getting a little rowdy that night.
People kept trying to make announcements and no one was listening to them because they kept trying to make them too often, which was hilarious.
Yep. And yeah, we tapped at about 10. That party, I think, was going on until like 2:30 in the morning.
At the earliest. And I want to point out, we weren't drunk, and everyone there was older than us by at least 10 years, I think, at that particular party.
Probably.
So yeah, we are lightweights in that comparison.
Again, we had an Airbnb to get back to. We wanted to turn in, get some sleep, and be ready for the next day.
We generally don't tend to do late night stuff at parties. We kind of made an exception for this one, so.
Yeah.
Or cons.
Because again, just going to a room party with a bunch of people you don't know is kind of awkward and weird, and depending on what group of people it is, also potentially terrifying.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you get invited to a room party by a very creepy looking dude, you probably shouldn't go to that. Whereas at no point did we feel uncomfortable or unsafe at all at this con.
No. And I think it also helped the parties were sanctioned by the con, which made it nice. And this was also, I think, technically a panel room, although the panels were kind of more stuff were happening while...
we have some alcohol, would you like to try it?
That was pretty much the panels that night,
yes. That were being held in there, primarily.
I think there was also a naughty limerick competition at some point in that room, which is...
You did write a bunch of naughty limericks, and we never actually got a chance to present any of them.
Yeah, it's fine. We can have that be bonus content if we ever set up a Patreon for this thing that no one listens to.
That's fair. But yeah, so at that point we tapped, we headed back to the Airbnb. We're not going to talk in any great detail about the Airbnb because this isn't an Airbnb review podcast.
No, you were woken up at like 6 a.m. by some loud music.
Yeah, that was a choice because this one was an apartment rather than an individual house. And again, it was convenient to the venue. It was comfortable enough. It got the job done. I don't think I need to say too much more than that.
Yeah. And again, we tend to choose Airbnbs because of my disability, and they do actually tend to be a bit cheaper than renting a hotel for 3 nights. So it tends to meet our needs as congoers a little bit more, but we know we're probably I think, in the minority of people who like go to cons.
We are. But I think the majority take advantage of hotel block rooms and that kind of stuff. But yeah. So the next morning, we got all dressed up. And do you want to explain our costumes for Saturday?
So I saw at this con there was going to be a unicorn romp, which is, I wasn't really sure what to expect because it didn't have a description. I assumed it would be a unicorn parade, but it was being run by an adult. So I assumed that adults were allowed, and they're typically not allowed at unicorn parades unless they're pride parades, which are valid. But I don't get a lot of opportunities to like be in a unicorn parade, and who wouldn't want to be in a unicorn parade? So I had a really poofy dress, and I've been getting some comments on the fact that it was kind of a unicorn-like dress, so I designed a unicorn persona that was similar to Princess Celestia from My Little Pony. And then we've been meaning to make kind of a little bit of a gender-bent costume for you for a while, So
since you were sort of doing pseudo Princess Celestia, I was doing pseudo Princess Luna.
Because, of course, you had to be a goth unicorn.
Obviously. So, purple trousers, purple waistcoat, blue cloak, blue horn, I believe?
Blackhorn.
Blackhorn. One of the things we want to do is add some, transferable stars to the cloak. But those items turned up on Thursday. We did not have time to actually do that yet. But that's on the list. And as per usual, my costume was mostly an afterthought.
Yep.
Though it did mean I was wearing lipstick for the first time. I don't think I've worn lipstick before.
It stayed on for most of the day. It got a little bit faded later, but not too bad.
Yeah, I got a little faded after dinner.
Although I do want to point out I did all your makeup for you.
Yes, you did, and you did a very good job. I got complimented on my makeup twice, I think. And, I pointed out that you did it.
I think I pointed out that I did it once.
Yeah.
It's kind of a double, because like I can't see my own makeup, so when I mess it up, at least I don't have to like look at it all day. Yours I have to look at all day, so I think I did a decent job. At least I was pleased with it when I looked at it all day. So
yeah. So our opening thing was the unicorn romp,
which I think was at 10.
Yep.
Which we did appreciate. Give us a little bit of time to like lie in, and some people were definitely hungover from last night. The con was pretty dead at 10 a.m. Except for the people who wanted to be unicorns. All of those people were really alive.
Yep. So the unicorn romp was being organized by Steampunk Xena, who is fantastic as a human being.
And had, I think it's 6 different unicorn costumes for this weekend, which was awesome.
I think she might have said 8. Again, I kept seeing her in completely different costumes throughout the day, and I don't know how she managed to have the energy to constantly keep changing like that.
It's like life goals.
Yeah.
Be glad we can't get rooms at the con, so I can't change throughout the day.
Yeah. But yeah, so the romp was fun. She turned up with spare horns for anybody we could rope into it who hadn't come prepared. Bubble mixture, one of those bubble sticks you get as a kid where you sort of dunk it, you blow.
Yep.
Bunch of those.
Like a wand that played music that she had set to be basically playing songs about unicorns.
Yep. I think she only had about 3 songs on my list, so they did have to keep looping.
Oh, good songs though.
Yeah, I had Space Unicorn stuck in my head for like 3 days afterwards.
Space Unicorn.
We don't want to get copyright struck. I don't think that's a thing on these podcasting services, but let's not risk it. And yeah, one person turned up in the full-on inflatable unicorn costume, which
was awesome.
They did have to run upstairs and get, because I think they said something about their portable pump had run out of batteries or something, so they had to run up and get the big one from their room. But it would, so after we all kind of congregated, we paraded around the hotel, being unicorns.
Which was pretty awesome. Everyone was very encouraging.
Yep.
A person in the vendors hall gave us all boas, which was really sweet of her.
It was.
And yeah, don't get a chance to like parade around as a unicorn as an adult. It's really something that adults should try to do more. It might make your heart grow a little bit bigger, I think.
Agreed.
It was just fun and silly. There was one kid there who I think was the child of one of the vendors, but everyone else was an adult. So it was a lot of fun to just go around in unicorn costumes while vendors and people were cheering us on.
Yep. So yeah, that was fun. That was silly. What did we do after that?
And the unicorn romp, obviously didn't take too long, so we kind of had a bit of a gap there. We, I think, made masks at that point.
Yeah. So we agreed beforehand to take part in the Iron Maker mask competition, which was basically on the morning you'd get given a box of stuff, including a sort of standard mask, and you had to like build a steampunk mask before a presentation ceremony that afternoon, or about 1 o'clock, I think the ceremony was. So we basically just, snagged a little space in the con area and just kind of made masks for about, 30, 40 minutes.
Yeah, it wasn't an event that I think really worked for us as people who, again, were in costume and weren't staying at the hotel, because we just didn't have a space we could really go to do this, and we were in my case, a fairly expensive costume, and I didn't want to get glue on it, and I couldn't change out of it, or anything else, so it was...
So our options were pretty limited on that front.
Yeah.
And they only had... So the reason we were doing that particular event is that they mentioned on Facebook a few weeks back that they'd only got one entrant for it and were probably going to have to cancel it.
And I felt bad because I've been in that situation where I've been really excited about a thing, and people weren't able to do it because they didn't get enough entrants, which is also something I wish cons generally would just kind of stop worrying so much about. Like, if you only get one entrant, just celebrate that one person. Like, don't cancel the contest. Just see if, like, anyone else wants to do it day of, and if not, just celebrate that one person.
Yeah, I would agree. So you basically signed us up, out of a certain amount of guilt.
Yeah.
And
I was very unclear on how it was supposed to work.
I think the con was a little unclear on how it was supposed to work.
Yeah, the con is trying definitely a lot of new stuff in terms of what they're trying to do, and I think they're still kind of in a learning process as a second-year con with how some of it works.
So I think my recommendations for them would be, if they want to do this event again, which I would absolutely encourage them to do this event again.
Although I don't think we would participate in it again.
Probably not. I don't think it's our speed, but that's okay. Is put a thing on the schedule on Saturday morning that's just an hour-long block, give an actual room, a box of shared supplies for everybody who wants to compete, and then they can just go have that 1 hour to make their thing, then they go away, the judges come in, the judges look at them, and then they do the presentation of the awards later that day.
And then it can also maybe be displayed in like the back of the room or something like that, so people could actually look at them. Because the person who actually tried at this competition, which we did not, made a really cool looking mask. He even used like the box as the back as like a back design, and it was very cleverly painted and designed. And I wish that other people could have like seen it. No one should have seen our masks, but that's fine.
Well, again, ours were hodgepodge together in the lobby of the hotel in like 30 minutes.
Yeah. Which I can only help with limitedly, in part because of my disability, in part because it was in a giant poofy dress. So.
Yep. With some scissors we literally borrowed off somebody else who was doing crochet over on another table just for fun. Crochet? Knitting? No.
Yeah.
One of those things. Needlepoint, I think.
Yeah.
Anyway. But thank you very much to that person for the loan of your scissors.
Yes.
But, again, I think the event has potential. I think people would enjoy it. I think it just needed its own dedicated space and time slot, other than at the presentation.
Which is typically how I've seen them done at other cons. They have versions of that where they just give you a box of supplies in an hour and see what you can do.
Yeah.
And that also, I think, makes it a little bit more fun because you can at least be in a room with other people who also don't know what they're doing. And it's a little bit more fun at the end to just kind of present your creations in a group of people, which also didn't wind up happening due to scheduling conflicts. And it was,
yeah, for whatever reason, the presentation ceremony, which was later that day, had quite literally 0 attendees other than us, because there was a schedule conflict with the person who actually the only other entrant, so they couldn't be there.
Which was a shame for them, and also just, I think, pretty awkward for us.
Yep.
Like, it wasn't really fun to be in a room where somebody clearly had put more time and effort into their mask, and obviously should have won and did win, which was awesome for them. But it's just awkward to kind of just be sitting there by yourself while that inevitable conclusion comes to pass. It's just not a very pleasant experience.
So yeah, again, I don't think the idea is bad in any way. I just think there are things they could do to make it better next year.
Yeah.
That's fine.
And again, I recognize the disorganization. This wasn't really any one person's fault. It's just more maybe there could be a little bit better ways to do it.
Yeah.
And I honestly don't think it's really our thing to begin with. Like, I don't like being creative in time-sensitive ways, and also because of the dresses I like to wear to cons, I don't really think it's something I could really realistically participate in, so...
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, again...
Not everything you try is going to be for you.
Yeah. So we definitely did something in between making the mask and the presentation ceremony, because I remember taking the masks back to the car, then having to go out and get them. And that was definitely something else in the ballroom.
Yeah, I'm pulling that up now, sorry.
This is the problem with going to this many cons. You start to forget exactly
No, the problem is that you forgot the mics in the car.
That's also a factor.
And because of that, we don't remember stuff as well, because we're now 3 days later, and school started again.
Yay.
This was defense for, or walking stick for self-defense, which you should probably talk more about that one, because you do HEMA, and this was a version of HEMA.
So this was a class based on Victorian self-defense. For anybody who's not aware, there was a guy back in the Victorian age called Barton Wright, who did what all good Victorian gentlemen should do. He went off to a foreign country and he stole some stuff. Specifically, what he stole was knowledge and training in Eastern martial arts. And he then came back to the UK and created his own mixed martial art, which he named after himself and called Bartatsu. And a number of subdivisions of that spun off based on teaching Victorian gentles. And interestingly, Bartatsu was taught to Victorian women as well as Victorian men, but it was to teach them how to defend themselves from ruffians. And I love Bartatsu. It's really great as a mixed martial arts style because the primary weapon of Bartatsu is the cane, or occasionally the umbrella. Because the cane or the umbrella, that is what you as a Victorian gentle will be walking around the street with. So here's how you defend yourself using it. So the class was being taught by somebody who studied Victorian martial arts for a long time. He did a fantastic job. He actually makes his own canes. And I very much enjoyed it. My Bartatsu is very, very rusty. I have not done a Bartatsu class in a while. But it is just, it's such a fun system from here's how you take a basic everyday object like a walking cane, and here's how you use it as a weapon to defend yourself. And it was focused on defense, not attack, because that's what Wright taught. And yeah, it was a lot of fun. So I got up and actually participated in it because it started off with a little bit of a lecture and then transitioned into effectively a martial arts class. It was a non-contact class. It was purely a case of here's how you move your stick. There wasn't any sort of like partnering up and testing techniques on each other or anything like that. Which again is probably the right thing for a con where everybody's wearing elaborate costumes. But it was a lot of fun. I miss doing HEMA. I haven't done it in quite a while.
Yeah, the type of passion he's expressing is the type of passion that I think everyone at this event has for different stuff, which is super sweet. I didn't participate in this because, again, giant ball gown, and also I don't like martial arts in any capacity, even for self-defense, but it was interesting to hear about badass women with umbrellas that were going around and,
At some point, I'll have to tell you the train madness story.
Mm.
Again, maybe we'll make that a Patreon exclusive if we ever start a Patreon.
We're not starting a Patreon.
Not unless we suddenly start getting an awful lot of listens for some reason.
So yeah, but again, it was fun to watch people do that, and it was fun to kind of chill out in the back of the panel. So after that, when we finished Iron Maker, I think we needed a bit of a break just because there was that kind of awkward, kind of tired period around 2 or 3 in the afternoon. Mm-hmm. So I think we both mostly chilled out in the games room for a bit. We did poke around at a couple different panels, but my brain just wasn't able to handle it. I do want to highlight, we saw a bit of debunking myths about women's fashion by Madame Sarah in one of the panel rooms. We didn't stay for long, but that person clearly knew their stuff, had a very well-researched presentation that was very good and very thoughtfully laid out. I just didn't have the mental energy at 2:30 in the afternoon. to kind of really enjoy it as much as I should have. So I think we pivoted to the games room for a bit.
Yep, we did.
Which most cons have, which is basically a board game library. They were also doing some tabletop games. Sounded like there was a bit of confusion about who was supposed to sign up for the tabletop games, but we didn't do any of that part, so.
Yeah, I get the impression that the tabletop games room was kind of, again, I think the organisation there was a little looser than it should have been, because I think they were supposed to rent a games library that, for whatever reason, suddenly became unavailable.
Mm-hmm.
So I think the games library was quite literally one guy's board game collection.
Yep.
Which we've seen cons that have also had to do that before. That's not something that... It's happened often enough that I don't think it's an uncommon problem. So if you've got a large board game library and your friends are running a con, be prepared to volunteer some stuff.
Yep.
But again, standard rules on that. If you're borrowing a board game, just hand over your ID so that they can get their board game back.
Yeah, decent enough selection. We played a little Splendor, which was a favorite of ours, and then we played So Clover, which is a game we brought. Which I think at one point, might have been the next day, the person was just like, wait, that's not one of our board games. Do you bring that?
That was later in the same day, but
yeah.
They also, and again, they had some tabletop RPGs going on, which if we'd known about, I don't know if we'd have signed up to play them. Because again, like, if we're going to a con specifically for that,
Mm-hmm.
then we absolutely would. But if it's a con where we're kind of going for the other stuff, we're not sure if we want to spend 5 hours playing a tabletop game.
Sorry, I got distracted because I still had Space Unicorn in my head.
Of course you did.
But yeah, it is something for which, because 5 hours is a lot of con time when it's only 3 days long, it's hard to commit that much to a game. Although a steampunk tabletop game, I definitely would play at a con like Origins.
Oh, absolutely.
So after that, reset a bit for 4. We went to theatrical ghost story readings by the same person, Leanna Renee Hyber. I'm so sorry if I'm butchering your last name. Where she basically read a bit from her new book, which has some of her own personal ghost stories.
Oh, which is, again, I adore her presentation style.
It is.
Like, she has so much energy.
And a big point of the panel, which I thought was actually really nice, is ghost stories aren't always meant to be scary. They're mostly just meant to be interactions with ghosts, and ghosts aren't always necessarily scary. Yeah. Sometimes they just want to say hi to somebody.
Yeah, which was, that was cute. Actually, one thing I do want to say, so last week I was talking about hearing an author read their own work is always a fascinating thing because they know where the emphasis should be, they know where specific things are, but they're not necessarily trained performers. She is a trained performer, and you can tell the difference.
You can definitely tell her. I was completely captivated by that story.
Yeah, and again, that's not at all a knock on the people we were listening to last week. That's just you can tell she has training because she is very, very good at this.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was a lot of fun.
It was. Again, it was. I like stories like that are, a little bit creepy, but oftentimes just kind of fun. And she has a very great writing style, so definitely want to pick up more of her work. After that, I think, was the cosplay competition.
Yep. Which we went and watched. We did not take part in. A couple of people did ask us if we were going to, and we just said no. Because, as we mentioned before, cosplay contests, we've done them once or twice, and just, I don't know, we're just not fans of getting our work judged like that.
It's one of those things where I don't know if, contests really spur on creativity the way people think they do sometimes, as opposed to limited because they have very specific rule sets that you're supposed to kind of be judged within and between. And half the times, and we've seen this a lot of cons, although I'm not saying it with this con because we obviously didn't compete, those rule sets just kind of change based on who's participating.
Yeah.
But it is something for which this particular cosplay contest only had, I think, 5 or 6 entrants.
5 entries.
Which is...
Well, 5 entries, but one of them was a 2-person.
Which I do wish... Because everyone's dressed up, I kind of wish they would do, a showcase or something like that, where there's maybe not a competition element, or the competition element of it is, kind of downgraded, where people can just, walk on stage and maybe say a little bit about their persona or their character or how they made the costume. Because I would love watching that. It doesn't really need to be a competition. That might take the pressure away from some people who maybe don't feel like competing, but might want to show off their costume.
Yeah. Which, again, that's a thing we'll be able to talk about a little bit at Fan Expo next week, assuming they're doing that again.
They are doing that again.
Cool.
Because they have a version of that, although it's a bit lighter. I think at a Steampunk Con, you could really just do, a full... Because they had an hour and a half slotted for this. It did not take an hour and a half.
40 minutes total.
Yeah, maybe not even that much.
Yeah. And that was where we saw, again, it's interesting that of the 5... So, there were 5 competitors, one of which was a pair.
Mm-hmm.
So yes, they gave out first, second, third prize and best duo,
Mm-hmm.
which meant that there was only one person who didn't win anything. And honestly, their costume was fantastic, and they deserved to win something. And so they did get a judge's shout out, but it's one of those things. I don't think it needed to be a competition, especially with that few people competing.
Because I know they also had some extra words on or awards on their website that didn't really wind up giving out, like most villainous and stuff like that, that just kind of rolled into the general awards. And it's just like, I don't know, just give everyone an award. There's only 5 people competing. There's no reason to not give them all an award.
Yeah, or just don't have it be a competition at all. Because again, I don't think it needed to be.
Yeah. Although that's where we saw the 2 Beetlejuices. I really wish there were 3 Beetlejuices, though.
Yeah, so do I. That would have been amazing.
Nope.
Yeah, but 2 steampunk gender flip Beetlejuices.
Which, as far as we can tell, they did not coordinate. They just happened to show up, which is awesome.
That's kind of fantastic.
And the contest was, I think, well run. The people, I think, were having fun. But I do wish we could get maybe more people at the con involved, because it's a con where everyone's dressed up, and I really want to know more about like all the characters, why they're dressed up, who they're playing, and just having a kind of showcase where people could just show off their character or persona. I think would be really cool, especially at a Steampunk con.
That would be fantastic, because again, like, everybody there is so damn creative. I want to hear about their creativity. I want them to I want to hear them talk about their airship captain character, or their Victorian madam who's secretly who's using her brothel to spy on people. These are the kind of characters I want to hear them talk about, and just because they clearly love them a bit.
Yeah, and I do think not everyone wants to have their creativity judged, so having like a showcase or something like that could be a great way to
do that.
To do that without the same like level of pressure, because it's hard to have your creativity judged.
It is. Like, you and I aren't fans of it. It's why we don't do more cosplay stuff. Is the thing about cosplay we like is those moments in a corridor where a small child looks at you and just like has absolute magic in their eyes.
Yeah, or when just people compliment me or something like that. Those are really great moments. Like explaining my stuff to a panel of judges and having it be judged on kind of strict and specific criteria is a little bit less fun. So.
Yeah. But yeah, so again, not a knock. The cosplay competition went off pretty much without a hitch. It's just not convinced it needed to be a competition. But in all honesty, that's kind of a bugbear of ours with the cosplay community in general.
Mm-hmm. Although we did go to another contest pretty much immediately after that.
Yeah, but that one was a bit lighter and sillier, because that was the villain contest.
Yes. So we took a break for dinner. Then at 8 was the Victorian villain contest, which was chaotic and also delightfully fun.
Yeah. So the principle of that was basically you turn up, you enter yourself in, they gave you a number, and then you sort of went round with various categories. So there was best evil laugh, best evil catchphrase, best costume, and all of that kind of stuff. And it all kind of amalgamated into a final score. Now, it was a little chaotically run insofar as I think there was intended to be a panel of 3 people judging.
Mm-hmm.
Or 4 people judging, actually, I think. But they didn't think they had enough people entering. So to kind of encourage a few more people to enter, 3 of the judging panel basically just got up and entered the competition.
And then it is asked a random audience member to judge.
Yep, so you became a judge.
Yeah, I became a judge.
I'd already signed up to enter the competition because, again, I was playing an evil unicorn.
Yep.
We should mention the theme of this con was heroes and villains, by the way, which was,
very fun theme.
Yeah.
And I will say
a lot of room to work with.
Yeah, and everyone who competed in the villain competition, to the extent that it was a contest, did an amazing job.
Yeah. And they all kind of knew what they were doing was fundamentally a little bit silly, and that's absolutely okay.
It was basically a silly improv. It wasn't even really a contest so much as it was just role-playing a character for fun a little bit.
Yeah. Which, again, you pretty much admitted to the audience that, the scores were being kind of made up as you went along.
Mm-hmm.
And the guy who was still up there with you pretty much told you to exclude any of the people who had been on the judging panel originally.
Well, they were giving away a con badge, although I was a bit unclear on what they were giving away at the time I was judging. And I do think the person who I chose to win the competition did the best job of having a full character presentation.
Oh,
that's why I
chose.
chose.
She did fantastic.
She did.
She was dressed as the Snow Queen.
Yeah.
She made it very, very clear on multiple occasions that she does not mean the version from Frozen. She means the original Hans Christian Andersen. And she did a fantastic job of embodying that character and just having so much fun with it, that's what I love to see.
And yeah, it was really fun to kind of see everyone up there. And I also excluded you from my judging. You didn't win by points if I was going strictly by points anyway, but I was just like, I'm not going to give it to him. That's lame.
And again, I know how to give a villain speech.
You did. And again, I felt you had some good moments. I did undercut them at a couple points, but...
Yeah, but that's kind of how our relationship works.
Yeah. It was fun to see everyone just kind of in those creative, I don't know, just being those characters. And it was really hard to choose just because no one did a bad job.
Again, it is just what I love about Steampunk Cons is that love and that passion.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, after that, I think we went out to another room party.
Yeah. Oh, one thing I did like from that is they said they were only going to interview select contestants, but they gave everyone an interview question, which I thought was great, just because everyone could role play a little bit longer. So that was pretty awesome.
Yep. Again, that's the kind of modification that you make on the fly that we approve of. Yeah. So again, after that, up to another room party.
Mm-hmm.
Slightly lower key. You could tell everybody was a bit tired from the last room party.
Pretty much.
But it was fun. It was nice. We talked to some people, including somebody who I think they said was their first con.
Oh yeah.
And that was just very, very sweet and wholesome. And she was having a whale of a time, and I'm very glad to hear that.
Yeah, and I think she was very excited to meet Lady Asgard. Was there, I think, signing some photos. So I'm glad that their fan base is taking off well.
Yeah, if you've not encountered Asgard, she is a phenomenal cosplayer whose primary persona is a steampunk robot.
Mm-hmm.
And the costume is phenomenal if you've ever seen it.
Yeah. Lady Wilsworth was also attending that party from abroad, which was great. She's her companion. The in-universe explanation is that Asgard is her cyborg companion / droid.
And I think, Lady Wills is meant to be her,
maker.
Is she a maker or just her maintainer? I'm unclear on that. Anyway.
I'm sure we will be told more about the lore next time we see them. They're both amazing individuals. You should definitely seek them out if you're at a con.
You absolutely should. But yeah, so that was fairly low key, but it was just nice to talk to people. That's the point at which we realized the room we were in was actually just a hotel room.
Yeah, we just saw a bed with a bunch of stuff on it, but it was very fun. Had the same punch from the night before.
Yep.
And when you told the person the night before to give you the punch that doesn't give you drunk, they did give you the punch that didn't give you drunk, which, I appreciate when they're honest about that.
Yep. I was just like, I need a thing I can drink and then drive afterwards. And they're like, here you go. Thanks. Which I possibly could have been more specific, but they knew what I meant.
Yep.
Because they could have been like, yeah, this is relatively low alcohol. As long as you don't drink more than half a glass, you'll be fine.
So should we move on to Sunday? In part because we're getting towards the end of our drive.
We are getting near the end of this drive. Again, we could always pause it, stop off at the shops, and then continue if we need to. So Sunday, we got there a little bit later. We didn't get there until near 11 because, again, we were a bit tired, and we didn't have to check out of this Airbnb until 11, that was useful. It gave us a little bit of a chance to just wake up and mosey on down in our own time. What was the 11 o'clock thing? Was that Nerf dueling?
This was Umbrella dueling. So I will say that Sunday had a lot of very fun things. A couple things that we kind of wish weren't opposed to each other. These are the fun, Steampunk Con games that we just adore. Umbrella dueling or Nerf dueling or tea dueling or teapot racing. Yeah. It'd be nice if they were kind of a bit more spread out as opposed to just all on a Sunday.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Which, again, I think they sort of acknowledged.
Mm-hmm.
So first it was Umbrella dueling, which is exactly what it sounds like. It is two people facing off against each other armed with umbrellas. The umbrellas are made of PVC piping, a pool noodle, and a cover to make it look more like an umbrella, but they absolutely work. And then you get given a top hat, which you have to wear, and your objective is to knock the other guy's top hat off.
Or girls, or non-binary person.
Yeah. Guys can be a gender-neutral term.
It's a debate we can have another day.
That's that. How about chap?
Chap's also nice.
Yeah.
Gentle folk.
Yeah. The other gentle's hat off. Because obviously if you lose your hat in a fight, you have been completely dishonored.
Mm-hmm.
And you need to run away in shame.
So I saw the first couple rounds of this, people went for the hat, which is what they did last year. Mm-hmm. But this year, people actually started doing actual fencing and going for blows and stuff like that.
Yeah, they're actually going for body shops.
Yeah.
Which again, it was So it was first to 5 points with a touch being any sort of strike to the arms or the body or the legs. No thrusting towards the face because we didn't have much in the way of safety equipment. Everybody was very, very good about that rule.
Yep.
And yeah, we got into a little bit of a there was a pet, so you and I dueled.
I mostly trash talked you while you hit a hat off my head, but we knew that was going to happen.
Again, one of us has sword training and the other one is very good at trash talk. We kind of knew how that was going to go. I mean, to be fair, if you knew any spells, one of them would be Vicious Mockery. Yeah, so that was a lot of very silly fun. I did end up getting called up to be King of the Hill at one point, and yeah.
There's also, I think, a 4-way duel at one point where you were on a team with somebody and you got to like blindside somebody because their back was turned to you.
Never turn your back on somebody in a sword fight.
And you got to talk with some other people who did fencing in some form, which was also super fun.
Yeah, I would have liked to have had the opportunity to talk to the guy who ran the Bartatsu class a little bit longer, but again, we both had things to get to. So yeah, what was it after Umbrella Dueling?
So Umbrella Dueling went to 12.
At that point, I think we had a lunch break.
Yeah.
So I remember just kind of scoffing a couple of burgers.
Yeah, touring the vendors hall and stuff like that. And then was Nerf Shootout, which was also in the ballroom, which is similar thing. It's basically, standard pistol dueling with obviously Nerf guns and not real pistols, where you do the like 3-step walkout, turn around and shoot with Nerf guns. Yeah. Somehow I managed to fail at shooting with a Nerf gun.
It was fun.
It was, but I couldn't get mine to fire because my grip strength is so weak. It was cool.
But yeah. And again, that was very, very silly, very, very fun. Little disorganized. Again, there was an attempt at a bracket system, which sort of fell apart.
Bracket systems, in fairness, I do them in class all the time, are actually quite hard to get right because you have to have like a certain number of people for it to work.
Yep.
The easier way to do that, which I think we kind of round up helping organize to do, is just like, okay, if you won, just stand on that side and we'll like get you to duel off against each other that way.
Yeah.
Which again is fine.
Which is very much your suggestion, but it worked quite nicely.
Once again, one of those things where I'm not sure like stuff like that even necessarily like needs a bracket. You can just have people go up and duel. Like,
yeah.
We don't need to have an overall winner.
Which they actually did. And they did hand out a medal.
Yeah, which is cool.
Yep.
They got from Goodwill, which is where you should get medals from.
Yep. Oh, is that where they got that from?
They said it there. I don't know if that's where they actually got it from.
That's fair. But yeah. And then the next thing we did was we watched teapot racing.
Which,
if you've never been to a steampunk con, the phrase teapot racing sounds very, very weird and silly. If you've actually been to a steampunk con, you know it's even weirder and sillier than that.
Yep. It's basically people who fitted RC remote control cars to look like teapots or have a teapot on them somewhere. All of them were very fun and elaborately decorated this year.
Yeah, there was a lot of really cool ones.
And this was one event I was really happy to see improved so much from the previous year. Because last year we also went to this. There were basically 2 teapots, one of which kind of didn't work, which again, fine. You're just entering teapot racing. This year they actually had a panel where you could like build an IRC car for teapot racing, which I think helped bring in a lot of participants.
I think it did. And again, it was really fun to see. The course has got a little bit more elaborate since last year. They built a bunch of extra stuff for it. And whereas last year they held it in the main ballroom, this year they put it out in the big corridor, which gave them a bit more space to play with, which I think was definitely beneficial.
It did mean it was kind of hard for people to be seated around it, and it was also, because it was near the doorway, a bit cold because the door kept opening. And again, Ohio in March, you flip a coin. Kentucky in March probably too. You flip a coin, warm or cold. That's just what it decides.
Yep.
And it was kind of getting back to cold that day, so it's a bit chilly.
It was a little chilly, but again, the event itself was just a lot of very, very silly fun.
Yeah.
You race your RC car teapot racer around the course. The course is some degree of completely silly.
Yep.
And just like some of the props they have for that, I do adore. Like the airship that's kind of suspended between 2 Eiffel Towers is just really cool. And they had a bunch of like quote unquote Cthulhu tentacles that was the only thing you weren't going to get penalized for if you knocked them over, because obviously fighting Cthulhu was a good thing to do.
Yep. Yeah, it was adorably cute. There was so much creativity with the teapots. I also like that they gave out like a lot of awards. They gave out like 9 awards, which is great, so everyone could have fun.
It was again, that was a lot of fun. The only problem is it was directly opposite from tea dueling.
Mhm.
And we love tea dueling.
We do, but I think everyone made the decision that teapot racing was so unique and was so well done this year that they chose it over tea dueling. So no one went to tea dueling.
Yeah, which meant they kind of decided to bump tea dueling back by an hour.
But they couldn't bump back by an hour because I think they only had the venue till like 5, and they had to do closing ceremonies. So they kind of combined tea dueling with closing ceremonies,
which sort of worked and sort of didn't.
Yeah.
This was also extreme tea dueling, which I don't think you need to like soup up tea dueling that much. They did it last year with Eldritch tea dueling, and honestly, you can just do normal tea dueling. You know, it's fine, it's fun. Tea dueling, for anybody not aware, is basically a game of chicken with soggy biscuits.
Yep.
So you take a biscuit, you dunk it in your tea, you hold it up in your fingers, and then you stare off against your opponent, and the last person to cleanly eat their biscuit wins.
If your biscuit falls in any way, you lose. If the other person cleanly eats it, this you had to like pop a balloon. It was a little bit more chaotic. I like normal tea dueling. I really feel like you need to improve upon normal tea dueling, although I do appreciate the creative attempts.
Yeah.
It's just popping balloons made it, I think, less accessible to kids. Like, it was obviously just a 4-rounder, so.
Yeah. Which, again, I think was partially just because they had that time limitation. They had to sort of really skimp on the number of participants. Like, they were literally handing out free biscuits at the end of closing ceremonies just because they had so many left over, because they clearly planned for tea dueling to be on a lot longer.
Steampunk cons, if you want a trick, and I've seen this at other steampunk cons, like, you can have tea dueling every single day and people will attend it.
They will, because tea dueling is just fun and silly. And just it's so lighthearted, and I do appreciate they had gluten-free biscuits, which is always nice. That was an option if you wanted to go that way. But yeah, and then it was closing ceremonies, which was mostly a lot of like they presented the awards for the teapot racing, which was fun. And again, they had a lot of awards to give out. Like, they had first, second, and third in like multiple different categories.
They presented and announced the awards for other stuff, thanked everyone, which again is very nice. They announced the awards for a couple other things. Like, one was the Iron Writer competition, which is, I guess you can write a steampunk story. And we thought about entering that. It's just we didn't know it was happening. We were kind of alerted to it in the Facebook group, or I was, like, about a week before the deadline, and we were just like, well, we don't really have time to write anything, so...
Yeah. Which, again, I think communication is one of the things this con does need to improve in that regard, with regards to just the cool stuff that they are doing. Because you and I might have been tempted to enter that. We've both written steampunk stuff in the past, and it might have been fun to either modify something we'd already written or write something completely new from the ground up. Like, I think it's something we would have been interested in. We just didn't really have the time to.
Yeah.
So yeah.
So do you want to pause it here and then give our final review?
I think that's the right call.
Because we're at Trader Joe's, because we're white.
Yep.
So yeah.
And we're back from that shopping trip. So.
They did still not have the eggs that I wanted.
Yeah. This is a thing with her. She really, really loves the Trader Joe's, like, Easter moose eggs.
It's close enough to Easter. They should have them already. I'm just saying.
Yeah. But anyway, so closing ceremonies was obviously the last thing we did at this con, because closing ceremonies.
And then we got on the road pretty quickly because it was a 4-hour drive for us.
Yep.
As I mentioned last episode, pretty much any con's going to be a 1-hour drive at the least.
Yep.
So, but this was, I think, longer. Generally kind of the limit of the range we like to go, but
generally
it wasn't too bad on the way back, though.
No, again, pretty smooth drive in terms of, get on a highway, stay on a highway for about 2 hours, then get onto a different highway for another 2 hours. So
we should probably talk about some of the stuff we didn't do.
Yep.
And you can't do everything at a con.
Yep. So as we said, they did do a whole bunch of we didn't take advantage of the tea room because neither of us drink tea.
He does not like tea as a British person.
Yeah, there's a reason why I had to flee the UK. But that was fantastic to see. I love it when they do that kind of stuff. In addition, they also were doing those like various alcohol tasting events, which all of which had limited seating on the grounds that they had limited amounts of the alcohol. But so if you wanted to go up and taste a bunch of different gins, you could do that. We're going to assume they were age checking those panels, but
I would think it's pretty safe to assume they're age checking those panels.
I'm pretty sure that's why we got age checked on the first night.
Yeah. They also had several bands playing late at night, several varieties of steampunk themed music.
Yep.
Neither of us are really music people, particularly
Yep.
live music people, but they seem to be doing a good job.
I'm something of a live music person, but you've got to be like, it's kind of the thing I have to prepare myself for. And again, I do think there are few things to really compare with a live music performance, but it does have to be the right kind of music, the kind of thing I'm prepared for. Cowboy metal was not necessarily something I was prepared for.
It's a unique genre, though.
It really is.
People in there seem to be having fun.
Exactly.
And I do like that they had some bands playing and stuff like that, and we're celebrating local artists.
Yep. They also, I think, had a couple of DJs and that kind of jazz. So they went all out on their like evening party stuff, which love to see.
And we did not buy anything from the vendors hall this time, just because I think, more expensive con to travel to, but they had a lot of great stuff, because Steampunk cons always have a lot of...
Yeah, the one thing I really want to talk about with regards to the vendors hall is, at certain types of cons, anime cons in particular, you're going to go and you're going to see the same stuff over and over again, because ultimately they got most of it off Temu, they got most of it off Amazon, whatever. And they're basically just reselling it at an upscale. At Steampunk cons, I'm pretty sure basically everything in that vendors hall was handcrafted stuff that they made themselves.
Yeah, please check out the vendors list, which I think is online.
Yeah.
Because there's amazing stuff. There's people who were... I think my favorite stall was selling like these cloaks that she made herself that were brilliantly designed. About in the $300 range in terms of pricing, but honestly, for something that's artisanal, that somebody makes themselves, that's a great amount to pay for like a very nice piece of clothing.
Yeah. And again, not something we could really justify over that weekend, given again, travel and everything else we had. We spent a fair amount to go to this con, relatively speaking, but
we had a lot of fun. And again, the vendors hall, I think, has just some great, really fun stuff, and all of these very fun makers.
Yeah, absolutely. What else didn't we do? Oh, one thing we didn't mention that we did sort of do.
I was thinking about that. You thinking about the mermaids?
I'm thinking about the mermaids.
So yeah, they had mermaid swim time, where you could go to the hotel pool and swim as a mermaid. A group called, I think, the Bloody Sirens or something.
Blood Sirens, I think.
Yeah.
Who like mermaid theme. They, in the full costume, you could get pictures taken with them. So we got some pictures with them. And I think if you like had appropriate swim gear, I think you could go and swim with them. I'm unclear on that, because again, you were wearing a ball gown.
I was wearing a ball gown, but one of the little girls at the con wanted to introduce the unicorns, which we were at that point, to the mermaids. And I wasn't going to tell the small child no, so we hung out back there for a few minutes.
Which again was very cute. They were, the energy that they had was really spectacular. Like they clearly loved doing that.
And yeah, it's such a unique thing to have at a con.
Also, I had no idea that pool was back there. But again, that was a lot of fun. What else was there?
And check to see if there's anything else on the schedule. Those, I think, were the main things. There were also a lot of panels we obviously did not go to again.
So many panels at this con.
There are a lot of crafting panels, like make and take wooden creatures is one I see. Some of these they charged extra for, some were free, which is awesome.
Yep. As I say, they did do the Make a Teapot Racer one, and a bunch of those teapot racers then competed in the teapot race the next day.
A lot of things on costuming. Again, it's just a very inviting con. They also had a swap table, which a lot of Steampunk cons do, which I really like, which is just basically a table where you can put random stuff and take random stuff, which was, I think, well utilized.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, like that. At one point, that swap table had a lot of stuff on it, and then it did not later. So,
which is the point of a swap table.
Yep.
More cons should have that. We have so much random stuff in our house.
Yeah, but we're very bad at getting rid of any of it.
Yeah. Some magic stuff. They had airships out in the hallway for a bit, which is very cute.
Yeah, they did do some airship racing, which was a little chaotic. I also get the impression that he really had one entry for that. Which, again, I would love to see them bring it back and do it again next year. And again, with the right amount of heads up, could be a really cool event. Though I think the airship did keep crashing into things.
Well, again, it's hard to control an airship these days.
Yeah.
They also had dance lessons. Tea Time with Asgard. Good.
Yep.
Lots of stuff. Honestly, the amount of paneling for a con this size was just awesome.
Yeah. Like as a general rule of thumb, most time slots they probably had 3 or 4 things on. And again, like I don't honestly think their scheduling was bad for the most part. There's just a couple of quirks that I think they could iron out for next year. Especially Sunday, I felt had a bunch of stuff crammed onto it that I would have liked to see spread throughout the whole weekend rather than just crammed into one spot.
Because I generally like to, I guess, pace my more serious, like lecture-style panels with more silly fun panels, just because it helps my attention span a little bit.
Yep.
So it would have been nice to have those like interspersed a little bit more, I think.
Yeah. Whereas most of those seem to be on Sunday, which I suspect that might have come down to the availability of their guest speakers, because I do think a few of them did have to like leave relatively early on Sunday. Because again, a lot of them had journeys to undertake that required plane flights and things like that.
And they all volunteer to host a panel on Sunday. I have a PhD.
Yeah, you do. Again, you've talked about doing one on like Victorian morality.
Victorian sensibility, all that jazz.
Yep. And again, I could literally just host a panel on I will read something to you in this voice.
I'm not sure that's enough for a panel.
I mean, it depends what I'm reading.
Yeah, those are the basic things. Obviously, we probably missed some stuff because it's impossible to do everything at a con, particularly a con like a Steampunk con, because it's just a bunch of stuff going on at once.
And it's so creative. So, I think now we're up to kind of like the final question, which is, would we go back next year? I'm calling that a hell yes. I don't know about you.
Yeah, I already want to go back now. I'm already looking for more Steampunk cons on the schedule. How like awesome and fun it was. Yeah. And they are still growing. There's still some kinks to work out. They're definitely in a very experimental phase of trying stuff out right now, but a Steampunk con should be in that phase.
Yeah.
Of experimenting, seeing what works, and moving forward with it.
I would absolutely agree.
They did announce that they're moving it back to, I think, the first, like, last weekend of May / first weekend of June next year.
Yeah. And again, they don't have their official dates nailed in yet. There was apparently they're still like finagling with the hotel, which again is not that uncommon for a con that's only in sort of its 2nd or 3rd year. If you're a con that's been using the same venue for like 15 years, getting it for the same rough time the next year is pretty easy. Whereas if you're still at that like initial establishing phase, then you usually have to do a bit more negotiating, which is fair.
And I think they're also trying to organize around other Steampunk cons, which is also fair.
Yeah.
I don't know. Kind of like March would have been a more convenient time for us, I think. But if we're even remotely in the country, which is always an open question with us next year, I think we want to go back.
I would say so.
It's just such a welcoming and fun atmosphere.
It is.
And I do think the space is good for it, because we've been in some Steampunk cons that were a little bit more limited on space than this one was.
Yeah.
I liked a lot.
Yeah, Key City was a little more crammed in. Whereas this one, because it had that like wide open central corridor thing, I never felt cramped or confined at any point. And I don't think you did. And you were wearing a hoop skirt for 3 days.
Yeah, awesome time. And if you are listening to this and have not gone to a Steampunk con,
go to a Steampunk con.
Go to a Steampunk con. You don't even really have to like steampunk. You like fun. You'll have a good time there.
Yeah. All you'll need to do is just buy some goggles and you'll get the vibe.
So next week / in 5 days, because you forgot the microphones, we're reviewing Fan Expo.
Yep.
Cleveland Fan Expo.
Cleveland Fan Expo.
They have a bunch of Fan Expos, which is a very different pace from our first 2 episodes, I guess. This is a 20 to 30,000 person convention.
Yep.
It has major celebrities like David Tennant, Jared Padalecki,
Michael Rosenbaum and Tom Welling, I believe.
They get very major celebrities every year. They're an extremely celebrity-focused con. It's going to be nuts. Yeah. I'm not prepared for it nuts.
Yep.
But we'll review that.
Yep.
Compare larger con. Probably talk a lot about why we don't like going to larger cons quite as much.
Yep. So yeah, thank you very much for listening to this 2nd episode of The Con Couple. If you enjoy it, I don't know, tell your friends.
Yeah. That's pretty much it. We're not big on social media.
Yeah.
We might post this in the Bourbon City Steampunk Facebook group.
Yep.
That's about the limit of our involvement.
Yeah. But hopefully I had a good time listening, and hopefully, that guy's clearly a tennis fan because his license plate is Serve Aces. So yeah, hopefully you enjoyed
Maybe
this.
he just likes aces.
Yeah, that's fair. There's also a tennis ball on it.
Maybe he likes aces and tennis ball.
So yeah, thank you very much for listening, and hopefully we will see you next week for Cleveland Fan Expo. This one's going to be a doozy.